The metallic taste of river fog clung to the back of his throat as he walked barefoot along the muddy bank, a thin silhouette swallowed by the Lahore dawn. Even then, long before anyone knew his name, long before the newspapers would print it in bold black letters, Javed moved like a ghost who had accidentally been born into a human body. People said the Ravi River carried spirits, the old fishermen swore they had seen faces beneath the water. Javed just watched quietly, as if waiting for one of those faces to break the surface and speak to him. He was 8, or at least that was what the neighbors estimated. No one really kept track in those cramped alleyways where children appeared the way stray dogs did. His house, if you could call a collection of bricks a house, sat at the end of a narrow lane, where the smell of kerosene merged with the aroma of fried dough and sewage. A rusted fan above the doorway spun like a dying insect. His mother talked little, his father talked with his fists. Javed talked not at all. But he observed. And what he observed, he remembered. There was a local joke whispered by the tea sellers. If Javed is quiet, it's because he has already decided something. They laughed when they said it, but uneasily, as if the punchline was missing. He grew up thin, sharp, and deliberate. Boys his age played cricket with broken bats. Javed sat on the rooftop watching them, swinging his legs and listening. He listened to screams from other houses, to the rattle of pots, to the call to prayer drifting over rooftops. He listened to the rattling inside his own skull, a constant vibration he could never quite silence. He learned early that sympathy was a luxury the poor couldn't afford. When a stray dog limped into the alley with a cracked bone, the children poked it with sticks. Javed simply crouched beside it, tilting his head, studying the way pain shaped its breathing. He didn't smile. He didn't flinch. He just watched. Some nights, when the fights in his home were loud enough, he slipped out to wander the city. Lahore at night was a different creature, neon lights, diesel fumes, the echo of distant honking. The city was alive, but only some lives mattered. If you were small and poor and barefoot, you were invisible. Javed discovered this early, and embraced it with a strange, calm acceptance. There was a tea stall near the Minari, Pakistan where old men gathered after dusk. They eventually got used to the silent boy who sat among them, absorbing their stories. One of the men, a retired constable with yellowed fingers and a cough that sounded like broken glass, once asked him, "Why don't you speak, boy? Cat got your tongue." Javed lifted his dark eyes, stared right at him, and answered in a voice so flat it almost wasn't there. "No. People just don't listen." It unsettled the constable. He later told others the kid spoke like a grown man who has already buried something. Life went on like that. Days melted into each other, stitched together by heat, dust, and the never-ending street noise. Nobody noticed that Javed had begun disappearing for hours at a time. Nobody saw the small things he did, the small experiments, a bird with one wing tied, a lizard trapped in a jar with no air holes. He wasn't cruel, he was curious. That was the truly frightening part. Years later, a journalist would write. His childhood left no witnesses. Only shadows. But at the time, he was just another boy walking through the morning mist, cold mud squeezing between his toes, an expression on his face that was neither sad nor happy. Just aware. Hyper-aware. The kind of awareness that made people uneasy without knowing why. He once told a neighbor woman, after watching her slap her own son, "If you hit something long enough, it stops remembering it was alive." The woman laughed nervously and told him to stop saying strange things. But the boy wasn't joking. Not even a little. And as he grew older, taller, quieter, Lahore seemed to fold around him like a veil. He blended into the background, the crowded markets, the broken sidewalks, the flickering lights of small shops. Whenever someone tried to recall him later, they described only fragments, the way he walked with hands clasped behind his back, the way his eyes scanned people like pages in a book, the faint scent of turpentine on his clothes. He was there. And yet never really there. Most monsters announce themselves with noise. Javed blended into silence. And he still had no idea that the city, that loud, sprawling, ancient city, would one day choke on his name. Because the truth was already forming around him, quietly, like fog rising from the river. He just didn't know it yet. But someone was watching. Someone who would remember. The smell hit first, a mix of frying samosas, diesel smoke, and the sour stench rising from open drains that snaked through Lahore like infected veins. By the time Javed stepped into the heart of the city, morning had fully awakened, dragging its chaos along. Rickshaws coughed black fumes, vendors shouted prices that changed every 30 seconds, and children darted between wheels like insects avoiding shoes. Those children were everywhere. Some slept on cardboard sheets under bridges. Some cleaned car windows at traffic lights for coins that were barely coins. Some simply wandered, hollow-eyed and barefoot, with the kind of shrug one develops when the world has already used up all its cruelty on you. Lahore called them street kids. Authorities called them statistics. Javed called them opportunities, though never allowed. He didn't speak much these days. He had discovered that silence opened doors much faster than words. Back then, in the mid-90s, no one paid enough attention to the rising number of missing children. A boy lost today was a headline tomorrow, a forgotten face by the week after. The city was too busy surviving itself. And Javed? He walked among them unnoticed, blending into the masses like a ripple blending into the river. He was in his early 20s now, thin but broad-shouldered, with a neatly trimmed mustache and pressed shirts that suggested someone who cared about order. People remembered his shoes, always clean, too clean for the muddy alleys he frequented. He had recently opened what he called a shelter for homeless boys. A modest house on Ravi Road, painted in a pale shade of blue that flaked every time the monsoon winds breathed on it. A hand-painted sign hung above the door. Helping hands for street children. The irony would sting much later. Kids came and went. They trusted him, or rather, they trusted anyone who offered food and a mattress. Javed spoke gently, listened intently, and offered exactly what a neglected child needed, attention without judgment. Uncle Javed, they began calling him. He didn't correct them. Some nights he walked the busiest markets, Anarkali, Data Darbar, and observed how children drifted through crowds. He understood their patterns better than the police did. He understood their hunger even better. Once, outside a brightly lit sweet shop, he watched two boys peer through the glass at trays of pastries. One of them whispered, "Do you think heaven smells like this?" Javed stepped closer. Quietly. Always quietly. "I know a place," he said. "There's food. And beds." The boys turned. Their faces were thin, dirt-streaked, desperate. "Free?" one asked. Javed smiled, not widely, just enough to show warmth without showing intention. Of course. What kind of person would charge children? The universe, perhaps sensing the lie, flickered the street lamp above them. The boys didn't notice. Children rarely notice flickers. Adults, on the other hand, would later remember. Javed led them away, walking with hands behind his back, his usual posture. The boys followed like ducklings behind a calm, guiding figure. Behind them, a beggar leaned against a wall, watching. His eyes narrowed. He had seen this man before, always with the lost, always walking them somewhere. But suspicion is a luxury of the living. And the beggar died 2 weeks later from an infection no one bothered treating. Javed's shelter grew busier. Reports circulated, unofficial, of course, that he provided meals, clothing, and a safe space to sleep. Police officers occasionally passed by. They always found neat beds, clean dishes, smiling boys. Some even praised him. "This man does more good than the government." Javed nodded politely and offered tea. He always offered tea. But at night, when the city sank into its darker nature, his routines changed. He walked through the shelter with slow, deliberate steps. The boys slept on thin mattresses arranged in rows. Their breathing filled the room like a strange lullaby, the sound of many small lives gathered under one roof. He scanned them. Counting. Always counting. If one was missing, he noticed. If one was afraid, he noticed that too. But the city didn't notice anything. The newspapers at the time were filled with political scandals, factory fires, power shortages. There were small articles, a boy missing, another disappeared, but they barely took up a quarter of a page. After all, these children belonged to no one. And no one belonged to them. So when they vanished, the city simply inhaled, exhaled, and forgot. But the children talked among themselves. They had their own underground network of rumors and whispers. They spoke of older boys who had visited Javed's shelter, and were never seen again. Sometimes, late at night, the younger boys would huddle and exchange frightening stories. Maybe they ran away, one suggested. Maybe they found jobs, said another. Maybe something else happened, whispered the smallest one. What something else? The boy shrugged. They say Uncle Javed doesn't sleep. It was ridiculous, of course. Monsters don't need sleep. But men do. Still, the rumor spread. Javed walked past them one night, heard the whispers, and paused. He looked down at the smallest boy. Not angry. Not offended. Just curious. Why would you think that? He asked softly. The boy swallowed hard. Your eyes, they're always awake. Javed smiled. A thin, polite smile. Maybe I'm just listening. To what? To everything. The boys didn't know what to say. They looked at each other, then at him. Javed continued down the hallway, his footsteps soft as silk brushing against concrete. Outside, the city continued roaring, unaware that beneath its noise, beneath its poverty, beneath its own negligence, something very deliberate, very silent, and very patient was unfolding. But Javed didn't worry. He had time. He had trust. He had a city too busy to care. And he had children no one would miss. Everything was in place. And yet, he still had no idea that someone had begun paying attention. The first letter arrived on a Tuesday morning, the kind of morning that begins with burned tea, a broken ceiling fan, and a constable swearing loudly at a file he misplaced months ago. Lahore's police headquarters never smelled good, but that day the odor of stale paper and sweat seemed especially bitter. Constable Rafiq was sorting through the morning mail when he found it. A plain envelope, hand-delivered, no return address. The handwriting was oddly elegant, sharp angles, neat spacing, a script that looked like it belonged in a private school, not a city drowning in dust and diesel fumes. He sliced the envelope open. The room seemed to hold its breath. Inside was a single sheet of white paper. No creases. No stains. As if the writer had worn gloves. Rafiq read the first sentence. And dropped the letter. His chair scraped the floor as he stumbled backward. Ya Allah, he whispered. Not again. The inspector looked up from his desk, annoyed. Rafiq, what now? Another complaint about stolen chickens. Rafiq shook his head, his lips trembling. No, sir. This is different. The inspector snatched the letter. His eyes darted across the page. First slowly. Then faster. Then with a look that resembled nausea. The room grew silent. Only the buzzing of the fluorescent lights filled the air. He read aloud. My name is Javed Iqbal Mughal. I have taken 100 boys from your streets. You do not look for them. Perhaps you should. A nervous chuckle escaped one of the junior officers. A prank, sir. It must be. The inspector slammed his fist on the desk. Do you think a prankster knows these names? He turned the page over. On the back was a list, handwritten in the same neat script, of nearly 24 boys. Their ages. Their locations. The last day they were seen alive. All names the police had dismissed as runaways. The room felt colder. The inspector read the next lines aloud, his voice low, strained. You ignore the children of Lahore. I do not. Every soul I took has a story, and I can tell you each one. He cleared his throat, but it didn't help. The words were too heavy. Then the most chilling part. If you wish to arrest me, come to my house on Ravi Road. I will be waiting. If you delay, I will send more names. Rafiq exhaled shakily. Another officer muttered, who sends a confession by mail? Someone, the inspector replied, who doesn't fear us. Within an hour, the building was swarming. Senior officers. Detectives. A journalist who bribed her way past security. Someone called it a hoax. Someone else called it a miracle. Someone whispered the first hint of the truth. What if he's telling the truth? The city's first collective shiver began right there, under flickering lights, amid the dusty tables and half-broken chairs of a police station that had never taken missing street kids seriously. 3 hours later, a second letter arrived. This one was even more unsettling. The inspector opened it with his teeth, too impatient for scissors. His hands were sweating. "Why are you slow? I invited you. Do not make me wait." There was no signature. Just a drawing. A small one. A child's face, simple, round, expressionless. Some officers looked away. Not because of the drawing itself, but because of how perfectly calm it appeared. Like the writer had been remembering it from memory. A memory he was comfortable with. By evening, the station was a hive of frantic voices and half-baked theories. He wants attention. He wants to play with us. He wants to scare the city. But the truth was simpler. Javed had begun writing because he was bored. And boredom in men like him is a catastrophe waiting to expand. 2 days later, the third letter arrived, hand-delivered by a trembling teenage boy who insisted a polite man gave it to him near Shah Alam Market. This one was longer. 4 pages. Each line written with surgical precision, as if the writer sharpened the pen before every sentence. It started like a manifesto. "The law is blind, deaf, and asleep. I woke you because you needed waking. I woke you because I wished to be seen." Then, a philosophical turn, as if Javed was lecturing the police rather than confessing. "When the world discards something, someone will pick it up. I picked up the children you left behind. Is that not a kind of service?" A laugh echoed in the room, no one could tell who it belonged to. It was the kind of laugh a person releases right before panic. The letter continued. "Come to my house. Everything you need to know is there. If you fear what you will find, fear yourselves instead." And finally, the black punchline. "Do not disappoint me." It was signed, neatly. Javed Iqbal Mughal. Ravi Road, Lahore. That night, the inspector gathered his team. Rafiq lit a cigarette with shaking hands. A younger officer muttered, "Sir, what if it's a trap?" The inspector smirked bitterly. "Oh, it's definitely a trap. But we already stepped inside." As the police convoy rolled into the narrow streets of Ravi Road, darkness descending over the city like a thick curtain of smoke, none of them knew that behind the pale blue door of that modest house, the real story was waiting. Silent. Patient. Perfectly arranged. Like a stage. Or a graveyard. The pale blue door stood slightly ajar, just enough to reveal a sliver of darkness inside, like an invitation written in shadow. The convoy of police vehicles screeched to a stop. Engines grumbled, doors slammed, boots hit the ground. But when the officers approached the house, their voices grew quieter, swallowed by an eerie stillness. It wasn't the silence of an empty home. It was the silence of something waiting. Inspector Malik lifted his hand, signaling everyone to freeze. The man's forehead glistened, whether it was heat or fear, no one dared to guess. "Rafiq," he whispered, "open it." "Why me?" Rafiq's voice cracked. "Because you're already standing closest," Malik said. "And because if it's booby-trapped, I'd rather not lose someone competent." Rafiq exhaled the kind of sigh a man makes before surrendering to fate. He nudged the door with the tip of his gun. It swung inward with a long, drawn-out creak. A breath of cold air exhaled from the darkness, brushing their faces like invisible fingers. Someone muttered a prayer under their breath. Another tightened the grip on his rifle. Then they stepped inside. The living room was impossibly clean. Not just tidy, sterile. Furniture arranged with geometric precision. No dust. No clutter. No sign of life. A single light bulb illuminated the room, flickering slowly, giving just enough light to make the shadows feel intentional. On the wall, meticulously pinned, were photographs. Dozens of them. Boys, smiling, laughing, staring blankly, running through streets. Some clearly street kids, others looked like they had simply wandered too far from home. Every photo had a number inked in the corner. 1 through 100. Rafiq clutched his stomach. "Oh God, oh God." Malik's jaw tightened. He didn't look away. There was a desk beneath the wall of photographs. A notebook lay open on it. Its spine cracked from use, its pages filled with clean, deliberate handwriting. Malik picked it up. On the first page, case notes, my work. Below it, the first entry. Number 1. Found near Data Darbar. Hungry. Offered food. Listened to his story. Ended suffering. The word suffering was underlined. Malik flipped to another page. Number 27. Did not believe me when I said I could help. Fear is the last thing they own. I removed it. Rafiq made a choking noise. Another entry. They always trust a kind face. Children know when someone listens. Adults never do. Malik snapped the notebook shut. Enough. But the house wasn't finished revealing itself. They moved deeper inside, each room colder than the last. The air smelled faintly of bleach and chemicals, too strong, too sterile. In a narrow hallway, they found hooks on the wall. Metal. Perfectly aligned. 6 of them. Empty. That was somehow worse. Near the end of the hallway was a door secured with a heavy sliding bolt. Malik hesitated. He didn't want to open it. Every instinct screamed to leave whatever was behind it untouched. But he had a badge. And a conscience he would later regret. On 3, he said. They unbolted the door. The light inside flickered. And they stepped into a nightmare carved in steel and silence. The room was small, barely larger than a storage closet. The walls were lined with shelves. On those shelves, jars. Dozens of them. Clear glass. Each filled with pale liquid. Inside each jar floated something, too misshapen to identify at first glance, too grotesque to process quickly, too awful to name aloud. But the truth was unmistakable. Rafiq collapsed to his knees. Another officer vomited into the corner. Malik closed his eyes, whispering something that sounded like a prayer and a curse fused together. The jars were labeled. Numbers. Just like the photographs. 1 through 100. A sudden noise echoed, a thud from upstairs. Guns raised instantly. Heartbeats hammered against rib cages. Malik signaled them to move. Step by step, stair by stair, they climbed, each breath loud enough to betray them. At the top of the stairs, a corridor stretched out. Another door stood ajar. A piece of paper hung from the knob. Malik pulled it free and read. You took too long. I'm already gone. But thank you for visiting. It's important that my work is seen. Below the words was a small drawing, that same blank-faced child from the earlier letter. But now it smiled. A thin, mocking smile. They searched every room. Every corner. Every possible hiding place. Nothing. No footprints. No signs of struggle. No evidence of escape. It was as if Javed had dissolved into the air the moment the police arrived. Even the neighbors claimed they hadn't seen him for days. One woman, standing barefoot on her rooftop, called down to the officers. He left quietly. Like he always does. Did he carry anything? Malik shouted. No, she answered. Only his shoes. That was the first hint, a small one, that Javed had walked away calmly, deliberately, probably watching them from a distance. It wouldn't be the last. They confiscated everything, the photos, the notebooks, the jars, the letters. The evidence spread across the police station like a disease, infecting every desk, every pair of eyes that saw it. And for the first time, the city woke up. For the first time, people asked questions. For the first time, the missing children were finally acknowledged. But Javed. He was gone. And he was not finished. Not even close. Because while the police scrambled, panicked, prepared statements for the media, Javed was already writing his next letter. The news broke before dawn, not through official channels, but through whispers moving faster than radio signals. By sunrise, Lahore was vibrating with panic. Mothers pulled their children indoors. Street vendors looked suspiciously at every stranger. Even the stray dogs sensed something had shifted, they barked more, slept less. A monster had been living among them. A polite, quiet, neatly dressed monster. And he was still out there. Inspector Malik hadn't slept. He sat in his office, elbows on the table, staring at the crime scene photos, the jars, the lists, the house that felt more like a mausoleum than a home. Beside him, Rafiq sipped stale tea, hands trembling so hard the cup clinked like a bell. "They'll crucify us," Rafiq muttered. 100 children, and we didn't even notice. Malik didn't look at him. Didn't. Refused. Rafiq let out a dry, humorless laugh. "Oh yes, that's better. Much more comforting." Malik rubbed his temples. "He knows we're hunting him now. That's why he wanted us to find that house." "Why?" Rafiq asked. Malik winced, as if the answer physically hurt. "Because he enjoys watching us panic." The public demanded action. Politicians demanded answers. Journalists demanded quotes. The police. They demanded sleep. But none came. The city turned into a giant pressure cooker, heat rising, fear simmering, and the certainty that something was about to explode. Detectives were sent door to door. Officers patrolled markets, bus stations, alleyways. Flyers with Javed's face were plastered on walls so quickly they peeled in the humidity. His image appeared everywhere, stern mustache, parted hair, those oddly calm eyes. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. For years, no one noticed him. Now he was on every street corner. And yet no one could find him. 3 days after the house on Ravi Road was raided, a new envelope appeared. This time, not at the police station, but at the office of The Nation, one of Lahore's most respected newspapers. The editor, a middle-aged man with the expression of someone permanently disappointed in humanity, opened it with a letter opener shaped like a sword. He skimmed the first line and immediately dropped his cigarette. "You are searching in all the wrong places." His palms began to sweat. He kept reading. "I walk your streets every night. You passed me yesterday near Body Gate. You didn't recognize me." The editor swallowed. He had been near Body Gate the previous night, smoking outside his office, watching the crowd. A single man had walked past him, humming quietly. A cold shiver spread down his spine. The letter continued. "I am not hiding. I am observing. The city is noisy, but its silence is more revealing. And then the kicker. I will turn myself in when I decide the time is right. Not sooner. Not later. Signed, J.I.M." Below the signature, a single fingerprint. Neat. Clean. Pressed with intention. The editor locked his office door, leaned against it, and whispered. "We're dealing with a lunatic, who writes better than half my staff." By that afternoon, the media frenzy had reached fever pitch. Talk shows debated whether Javed was a psychopath or an avenger. Columnists wrote dramatic pieces titled "The Butcher of Lahore" or "The Ghost Collector." Religious leaders preached sermons about the decay of morality. And in the middle of it all, Inspector Malik was drowning in leads, most useless, some absurd. One man claimed Javed was his neighbor. Another swore he saw him at the zoo feeding monkeys. A third insisted Javed was a distant cousin of his barber's uncle. The city suddenly had 1,000,000 detectives. None knew anything. But one night, something changed. A street sweeper near Shadara station found a small package wrapped in brown paper. No address. No stamp. Only a handwritten message. For Inspector Malik. Police sealed off the area within minutes. Bomb squad, dogs, reporters, it turned into a circus before sunrise. Malik arrived, his face gaunt, voice strained. He knelt beside the package. "Open it," he said. The bomb technician swallowed hard. "Sir, what if?" "Open." The blade sliced through the wrapping. Inside was a cassette tape. Old. Dusty. Unlabeled. Malik stared at it with dread coiling in his stomach. No one used tapes anymore. No one except someone who wanted to be old-fashioned. Someone who enjoyed theatrics. Someone like Javed. They brought the tape to the station. Inserted it into an outdated player. Pressed play. For a moment, silence. A crackle. Then a voice. "Come." measured. Almost gentle. It was Javed. "If you are hearing this," he began, "then you have found nothing." Malik froze. Rafiq stopped breathing. Javed's voice continued. "You search the city like blind men swinging sticks. You search for me. But you should be searching for what I left behind." A pause. A soft chuckle. "You only found one house." Another pause. "There are others." The tape clicked off. The room went still. No one dared to speak. Rafiq finally whispered. "Others. What does he mean, others? Please tell me he means rental properties." Malik closed his eyes. He knew exactly what Javed meant. "Other houses," he said. "Other rooms. Other children." He exhaled slowly, his voice cracking. "The hunt hasn't even started. And somewhere in that vast, trembling city, in a crowd, or a bus, or a tea shop, or a shadow." Javed Iqbal Mughal was smiling. The rain returned first. Thin, needling drops that felt less like water and more like the city itself whispering warnings no one wanted to hear. Lahore at night always had a pulse, but now it beat unevenly, like a heart under too much strain. Javed walked along the narrow street behind the old cinema, shoulders hunched, his coat clinging to him like a tired shadow. He kept his head down, but it didn't matter, people felt his presence before they saw him. A stray dog whined and backed away. A vendor extinguished his stove, pretending he was closing anyway. Avoidance was its own form of testimony. He muttered to himself, half irritation, half philosophy. Funny how a man becomes a ghost long before he actually disappears. Behind him, scooters hissed over wet asphalt. Somewhere deeper in the maze of alleys, a metal shutter slammed down. The city was curling inward, flinching. And the reason was simple. By now, too many mothers knew the name Javed Iqbal. Not from rumors. Not from warnings. But from the notes that kept appearing in mailboxes and under doors, notes written in that same neat, unhurried handwriting. Notes with confessions no sane person would put to paper. Detective Farouk stood at the balcony of the police station, smoking as if each drag might steady the tremor in his jaw. Downstairs, the officers yelled over one another, flinging reports, photos, timelines, each trying to outrun the weight of what they were discovering. "Sir, there's another list," an officer said, breathless. "Dropped at our gate 20 minutes ago." Of course there was. Javed wasn't hiding. He was organizing. Farouk flicked ash into the wind. "Every time we get closer, he steps further ahead. Does he enjoy this? Or is he trying to end it?" The officer swallowed. "Sir, some people are saying he wants us to catch him." Farouk let out a humorless laugh. "A man like him? Wanting anything? He's past wanting." Down on the street, a crowd was forming. Angry voices. Shouts for action. Demands for heads to roll, preferably the police's. A woman screamed at the station doors until her throat scraped raw. Others joined her like a wave breaking. Lahore, usually chaotic, now felt like a city holding its breath and losing patience. Inside a tiny rented room on the western edge of town, Javed listened to the roar of the distant crowd. He sat on the floor, writing with calm precision, as if drafting grocery lists instead of dismantling an entire city's sanity. He paused only once, to tilt his head, listening. The storm outside cracked and rolled. A faint smile touched his lips. "They finally notice," he murmured. "Took them long enough." He folded another note, placed it into an envelope, and sealed it with a firm press of his thumb. The glue tasted bitter, he smirked. Destiny rarely came flavored with sweetness. His mind drifted, not to his crimes, nor his motives, but something stranger. Something almost detached. What breaks first, he wondered aloud. A city, or the story it tells itself? No answer came. Cities are terrible conversationalists. He stood, picked up his bag, and slipped out into the stairwell without a sound. An old man passed him on the stairs, glanced up, and shivered without knowing why. As Javed stepped into the rain-soaked street, a pair of headlights flicked on in the distance. A car door opened. Someone stepped out. Someone who had been watching him. And in the police station, just as Farouk was about to bark another order, the emergency line rang. Not a normal ring. A slow, deliberate one. Like someone dialing with purpose. The room froze. Farouk lifted the receiver. A voice, calm, smooth, unmistakable, said, "Are you ready to talk, Inspector?" The storm outside cracked again, louder this time, as if the sky itself felt the city starting to break. For a moment, the station fell so silent that even the rain seemed to hold its breath. Inspector Farouk pressed the phone closer to his ear as if proximity could anchor him to reality. Javed. His voice cracked on the name, an involuntary betrayal of fear or exhaustion, maybe both. The voice on the other end chuckled softly, almost politely. "You sound surprised, Inspector. I've been calling you for hours. You just never listened." Farouk swallowed hard. His free hand gripped the edge of the desk until the wood creaked. Behind him, officers leaned in, frozen mid-motion, as if afraid any sudden sound would spook the voice on the line. "What do you want?" Farouk asked. A pause. Then the faint scratch of a match being struck. "To talk. Isn't that what you people always want? A conversation. A confession. Closure. A drag of a cigarette. And you know, I'm a generous man." Farouk exhaled sharply, anger flaring through the fear. "You think this is a game?" Another laugh, smooth, unhurried. "Oh, no. Games require rules. You and I, Inspector, we only have consequences." Through the cracked window of the station, Farouk could see the crowd swelling outside. More people. More posters. More grief turning into fury. If the city was a pot, someone had just turned the flame to full. "Where are you?" Farouk demanded, glancing at the nearest officers to trace the call. "Nearby," Javed said. "Close enough to see the lights in your window. Close enough to hear you whisper my name like a prayer you don't believe in." Farouk stiffened. He stepped back from the glass. Outside, dozens of glittering reflections stared back at him like a mosaic of broken souls. Javed continued, "Tell me, Inspector, at what point does a man admit he has already lost?" "You haven't won anything," Farouk snapped. "Ah, but that's the problem," Javed said. "You still think this is about winning." A faint sound drifted through the phone, distant thunder, a door opening, footsteps echoing on wet concrete. "Do you know why I'm calling tonight?" Javed asked. "No," Farouk said, though the truth buzzed under his ribs like a trapped hornet. He did know. Or at least he feared he did. "To give you a chance," Javed said simply. "One chance. Because after tonight, the city won't be thinking about finding me anymore. Another drag. They'll be thinking about surviving." Farouk motioned frantically for the tech team. A young officer nodded and began triangulating the call, fingers trembling. Javed continued, "I left something for you, Inspector. Something in the heart of the city. Something that will either open your eyes, or rip them out." "What did you do?" Farouk demanded. "Nothing you didn't already allow," Javed said, almost gently. "Nothing that wasn't growing in this city long before I was born." A soft sigh. "Look for the place where the river bends. You'll find the truth there." The line crackled. A burst of static. A muffled echo, like someone stepping into open air. Then Javed added, quietly, "And, Inspector, come alone. Bring company, and the city pays the price." Before Farouk could respond, the line went dead. Not disconnected. Killed. The station erupted. Officers shouted, printers screeched, phones rang like alarm bells. But Farouk didn't hear any of it. He stared at the dead receiver, knuckles white, lungs refusing to pull in air. Because outside the station, above the roar of the crowd, above the rain, a siren rose. Just one. But it was enough. A siren that meant someone had found something. At the river. And whatever it was, it would split the night open. The Ravi River was dark, swollen with rainwater, and indifferent. Its surface reflected the fractured glow of the city's lights, but the reflections were twisted, distorted, as if the river had no intention of showing reality as it was. Inspector Farouk arrived alone, just as Javed had ordered, the damp wind slicing through his coat like knives. The scent of wet earth and rotting leaves filled the air, and somewhere in the distance, a dog barked once, sharply, as if warning him away. The river bend was quiet, eerily so. Only the low hiss of water against embankments and the intermittent clatter of debris floating downstream. But the stillness was deceptive. Every shadow seemed heavier than it should be. Every whisper of wind sounded like a warning. Farouk's flashlight caught something near the riverbank, a small, pale envelope stuck in the mud. He crouched and pulled it free, fingers slick with water and grime. The handwriting was unmistakable, neat, precise, deliberate. He opened it. Inside was a single note. You arrived. Punctual, as I hoped. Good. Now observe. A ripple ran through the river, and the water darkened unnaturally. Farouk squinted, realizing that the current carried not debris, but shapes, small, pale forms floating face down, tied loosely with rope. His stomach lurched. A metallic tang filled the air. Then he saw the sign, a simple wooden marker, partially submerged, with a number engraved, number 101. His breath caught. He stumbled back, heart hammering, as a laugh cut through the night, a soft, almost polite laugh. It wasn't coming from the river, the wind, or any living thing he could see. It seemed to echo from everywhere at once. You're looking at the consequences of ignoring the invisible, a voice said. Calm, unhurried, familiar. Javed. Farouk's flashlight swung wildly, trying to locate him. Nothing. Only shadows danced along the river's edge. You wondered why I called you here, the voice continued. Because the city needs to see what happens when it sleeps. Every child I collected, a mirror of the apathy around them. You never noticed. You never cared. Until now. The water rippled again, and this time, the faces, pale, fragile, shifted, turning slightly, as if acknowledging him. Farouk's knees weakened. He wanted to step back, to run. But curiosity, fear, and duty pinned him in place. And yet, Javed said, softer this time, I am not your enemy. I am only the reflection of what you allowed to grow. Farouk swallowed, trying to find words. Where are the others? A pause. The rain intensified, hammering on his coat. Then the soft scrape of a footstep on wet earth behind him. He spun. No one. You're close, the voice said. But not close enough. I move with the shadows, in the cracks. The city is mine to observe, and soon, it will learn. Another envelope slid along the water's surface toward him. Farouk snatched it. Inside, a photograph, slightly wet but intact. One boy from the shelter, smiling faintly. Behind him, barely visible, a figure, tall, shadowed, watching. Farouk's stomach turned. That figure was unmistakable. Javed. He looked around. The river bend was empty. The shadows swirled. His flashlight trembled in his hand. And then he realized, the river wasn't just a river tonight. It was a stage. And he had been invited to watch. A laugh, soft, echoing over the water. Observe well, Inspector. The city begins to break now. By morning, the city had begun to twist. Not literally, but in every way that mattered. Streets were clogged, markets silent where they should be crowded, mothers dragging children home before sunrise, vendors shuttering their stalls early. Whispered warnings passed from mouth to mouth, a nervous litany of sightings, shadows, and strange letters. No one could be sure where Javed was, but everyone felt him. Did you see him? An old man asked a shopkeeper at Body Gate. Near the mosque. Watching. I don't know, the shopkeeper stammered. But I felt something. Someone. Children skipped along the alleys, looking over their shoulders. Some whispered stories among themselves, of a man who appeared in one corner, vanished in another, of a tall figure who smiled politely before disappearing, of a house that waited, empty yet full of secrets. Even the police were chasing shadows. Farouk had been working non-stop since the river bend. Each clue led to another, each lead dissolved into nothing. The city itself seemed to conspire, hiding corners, twisting streets, muffling footsteps. In the small alleys near the Ravi, a vendor swore he saw Javed handing an envelope to a young boy, then vanish into thin air. The boy ran home, trembling, clutching the note. The man watches, it read. The city will answer for its sins. By nightfall, rumors had metastasized. Javed had become more than a man, he was a shadow in every street, a whisper in every crowded bazaar, a presence felt behind every locked door. Parents whispered to their children, "Do not stray. He is here." But he wasn't hunting them, not yet. He was watching. Waiting. And somewhere, in the maze of Lahore, the city began to break in subtler ways. Shopkeepers forgot to close properly, leaving doors open to the night. Street dogs disappeared, cats roamed without fear. Sirens wailed unpredictably, not for crime, but for chaos. Farooq walked the streets, notebook in hand, tracing reports, sightings, and whispered stories. His mind spun like the river under the moonlight. Every rumor was a thread, every thread a knot impossible to untangle. And yet, each time he thought he was close, Javed had already moved, leaving only traces of his presence. A single slipper abandoned on a rooftop. A faint smell of turpentine in a narrow alley. A child staring silently at the river, eyes wide with unspoken terror. Even the media fed the hysteria. Headlines screamed. The Ghost Collector of Lahore strikes again. Where is Javed Iqbal Mughal? 100 children. And counting. But Javed did not answer. He didn't need to. The city answered itself. Every rumor, every fearful glance, every whispered story, each became his chorus. And then, one evening, a faint note appeared in Farooq's mailbox. You see how fragile it is? The city. How easily it bends when you know what lurks in the dark. Soon, you will learn the cost of looking away. No signature. No envelope. Only the handwriting, impossibly neat, impossibly calm. Farooq stared at it, a chill crawling down his spine. Outside, Lahore's streets were alive with tension, the quiet hum of fear vibrating in every wall, every puddle, every shadow. The city was breaking. And Javed was already gone. Because sometimes, the worst monsters aren't caught, they are witnessed. By now, Lahore had stopped pretending. The city's heartbeat had become irregular, a collective tremor of fear and disbelief. Streetlights flickered like dying candles. Markets emptied by dusk. Mothers pulled their children inside hours before nightfall, whispering stories of a man who could appear anywhere, at any time, and vanish like smoke. Inspector Farooq walked alone along the riverbank, the place where it all had begun. The wind carried the stench of wet earth, rot, and the faint metallic tang he would never forget. The river shimmered black under the moonlight, reflecting fragments of the city's panic and his own exhaustion. He clutched the notebook recovered from Javed's first house, the pages still damp, the ink smeared, but each word deliberate, surgical, almost philosophical. The law ignores the children. I collect what you refuse to see. You call me monster. I call myself necessary. Farooq had read it 100 times. Each reading tightened the cold knot in his stomach. He reached the river bend and stopped. The water was still, deceptively calm. No lights. No sounds. Only the occasional drip of rain from the embankment. He checked every shadow, every ripple, every whisper of movement. Nothing. Then, from the darkness, a soft, deliberate clap. Ah, punctual, as always, Javed's voice floated from somewhere unseen, calm as if complimenting a fine piece of art. Farooq's gun hand shook. Show yourself. A figure emerged slowly from the shadows. Javed Iqbal Mughal. Coat damp, hands clasped behind his back. Calm. In control. Eyes sharp, almost unnervingly human. Yet there was a stillness in him, a deliberate detachment that made the city's terror seem reasonable. You've seen the city break, Javed said. You've heard the whispers. Felt the fear. Good. You're learning. Enough, Javed. Stop this madness. Farooq shouted, trying to mask the tremor in his voice. Javed smiled thinly. Madness. No, Inspector. This is clarity. This is truth. A city ignores what it cannot see, cannot touch, cannot profit from. I gave the city a mirror. Farouk swallowed hard. A mirror? You killed so many children. Javed's expression softened, almost tender. I freed them, in the only way a city like this can be freed. I taught it a lesson it will never forget. You will never forget. And soon, the world will whisper my name the way it whispers all truths it refuses to confront. He paused, stepping closer to the river's edge. His reflection shimmered in the water, distorted, elongated, like the city itself. And you, he said, looking directly at Farouk, will live with this question forever: what is justice? The law that ignores? Or the act that forces awareness? Farouk's hands were shaking. His gun wavered. You can't justify this. Justify? Javed laughed softly. No. I only show it. He turned, walking slowly toward the embankment stairs. Farouk stepped forward. You're not leaving. Javed paused, hand on the railing, and looked back. I already have. Before Farouk could react, Javed vanished into the mist. Not running. Not hiding. Simply, gone. The river reflected only the storm, the moon, and Farouk's hollow stare. The envelopes, the letters, the photographs, the jars, all reminders of a truth too large for the law to hold. And in the weeks that followed, the city whispered, but never found him. Mothers refused to let their children out. Streets remained shadowed and empty at night. Rumors grew into legends. And every so often, someone claimed they saw him, a tall man, calm, polite, observing. Farouk never forgot the words, spoken with calm, surgical precision. You are watching the city break. You are living inside it. And sometimes, truth disappears along with those who knew it. The river kept flowing. The city kept trembling. And somewhere, beyond the sight of any living soul, Javed Iqbal Mughal walked free. Not a monster. Not a hero. Just a reflection. Of everything the world refused to see. The city would remember. But it would never forgive.